Hello, everyone. It's Gemini season. Well, we just have a new moon happen early this week, and I know we are all very busy at this moment. Marcus and I, we were just finish a conference last week, and I know Mandi has a lot of things going on. Especially, I know I want to congratulate Mandi, your new book just published, right? Could you tell us a little bit more about this book? And I'm going to show this book's, flyer here.
Oh, thank you, Rod. Yeah, it's not an astrology book actually. So surprise, which is surprising some people. As you can see, it's called The On Purpose Life, and it's basically a book that talks about what is life purpose, how do you find out what your life purpose is, and then how do you go about manifesting that in your life, what blocks you might come up against as you pursue your life purpose that might have stood in your way in the past, and also lots of exercises to get your imagination going, to get you thinking, and lots of tools as well. The book is full of tools as well. It's kind of based, well, it's not based on my own story, but it's inspired by my own story, how I changed my life and found my purpose. And purpose isn't just always one thing. It might be lots of different things. It isn't always a job. It can be any area of your life. It can be all encompassing, or it can be just be one thing. It changes as you grow and develop. And it's so it's a very practical book. It also has a spiritual element as well. And I will just add that astrology is a tool. I don't go into how you use astrology to find your life purpose in this book, because this is have a wider audience in the sort of self-help, sort of
Hmm.
spiritual teaching genre. But my next project is going to be for the astrologers, which is going to be based on some of the tools and the process of this book. So it'll be like a sister book to this one for the astrologers, because astrology, as any astrologer, student or beginner or professional or otherwise, will know how much value that is in a life chart. And there'll probably be workshops, maybe courses. I've already done a talk on life purpose in astrology in the birth chart for Rod's for Rod's school, the AOA UK. I've done articles about it as well. So I'm promoting the book. I feel like I'm promoting a book I haven't written yet, but yeah, this one is fantastic foundation for anyone, whether you're into astrology or not. You don't have to know any astrology, because there's not any astrology you need. So yeah, a lot of people,
Cool.
yeah, a lot of people have. I've told them about the book, and they're like, "Oh, that's the book I need. I need that book." So it's
And
been quite well.
all the it's fantastic, and all the feedback everybody's been giving me who's read it and who I recommended it to has been really positive so far. So please get it. It's
Yeah.
I think our friend Wendy put it really well. She said it's like having a chat with Mandi, and she values your wisdom and your input very highly, Mandi, as you know. So it's like literally having a talk with you and having your brain sort of like, all the little knots in your brain disentangled. So yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, Marcus. Thank
Cool.
you, Rod.
So thank you, everyone. And I think on purpose, this is quite also kind of a major theme of this season, because if we continue to chat, you will find out why I say this. So as I mentioned, we are earlier this week, we just have a Gemini new moon at the 6 degree Gemini, and then and that is quite interesting, because suddenly every planet is all on the air sign and fire sign. And that was huge difference. Should I share the chart?
Yes, please, Rod. Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. So yes, this is the new moon chart on the Tuesday, 27th May. And look at this chart, is quite interesting. Although I use London as a location, but you can see if we ignore the house, we can still see that kind of a Sun, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter is in the Gemini, and then we have the Chiron, Venus, and Neptune, and Saturn in the Aries, and that is kind of pretty interesting. What do you think?
Okay, shall I start? I mean, there's
Oh yes, please.
okay, great. There's a lot of positive in Gemini. So I mean, that's the first and obvious thing to say. So we've got obviously the lunation. Jupiter's still in Gemini. Jupiter, as we know, not very strong there, in detriment, but still Jupiter likes all the air signs, really. Jupiter is traditionally sanguine. It's of the nature of the air sign. So Jupiter has what's called traditionally participating triplicity in all the air signs. So all of that to say, Jupiter is the most positive planet traditionally, particularly during the day. For the past year, Jupiter's been in Gemini, helping Gemini. But here we've got the new moon with Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, in Gemini as well. So all of this to say, this month is going to be, I think, for many people, a really busy month. With lots of communication, publishing, particularly anything to do with chatting, talking, communicating, publishing. I just think it's going to be a month where there's a lot of stuff doing, a lot of toing and froing, a lot of talking, a lot of communications. And it's a really good month, all else being equal, for those things because of all this sort of positive stuff in Gemini. The only difficulty Gemini has, particularly with Jupiter in there, is editing. There might be a few too many things to do, like literally too many things to do. I've got too many dates in the calendar. I've got too many, things to do. I've got too many things in my in tray. So I know that for the next month or so, I've certainly somewhat overbooked myself. And that's a feature of Jupiter in Gemini. It's literally a feature, not a bug, which is why it's in detriment, because it kind of overstretches itself a little bit. But it's overall a very, very positive month for communications and all of that Gemini stuff, talking, communicating, speaking your mind. And if you've got any, like literally, as I was just saying, rather accidentally to Mandi, that's not the word I wanted, but whatever. It's good for disentangling thoughts, actually. It'd be quite good. So if you've got any cognitive tangles, this is kind of a good CBT month, if you like. It's a good month to sort of put new thought programs in place, if you like. Difficulties, and then I'll shut up and pass over the mic. But Aries, obviously, Saturn's just gone into Aries. Venus is in Aries, which is sort of helping Aries stuff out. But obviously, Venus is in detriment in Aries, although she is now in the last 10 degrees of the sign, which is in her decan. So she has some small special skills to bring in that last decan of Aries. But Saturn, of course, traditionally is in fall in Aries with Neptune and Chiron. But I'm going to focus more on the traditional two, the Saturn and Venus. So I think that's really interesting. It just means that Aries is, if we're being generic, and we are going to be generic because we're doing the whole world here and just general trends, Aries is beginning new stuff. So with Saturn right at the beginning of Aries, it's kind of a brand new cycle for Saturn. So woohoo, what does that sound like? Well, a brand new cycle of responsibilities and duties and obligations and things to do. And because Saturn's in fall in Aries, it's sort of like, in order for those things to happen, other things have to be broken down first. Other things have to be ended in order for new responsibilities to be begun. It's called this weird paradox of that Saturn in fall. Saturn is trying to be disciplined and trying to be boundaried and trying to help people boundary and edit their lives appropriately. And in fall, Saturn has real difficulty doing that because Aries is trying to do all the things, trying to begin everything, and it's antithetical to the energy of Saturn, if you like. So this is a month for really conceiving of potentially good new projects, new responsibilities, new things, but there might be some dead wood that has to be cleared out of the way first, I think. And with Venus there, it's sort of like there might be some little special skills that can be brought to bear to help ease those new beginnings into being. Something like that, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Marcus. Mandi, do you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, fantastic analysis as always, Marcus. And that Saturn that you brought up the topic of boundaries there, and Saturn's obviously just left Pisces, which is also about, Saturn in Pisces is also about difficulty with boundaries, but in a very different way. So you'll be feeling still those boundary issues, particularly as Saturn immediately comes to conjunct Neptune in Aries here as well. So we've still got that Saturn in Pisces energies kind of floating around. But as you said so eloquently, those boundaries are about like, oh, there's no boundaries, we can just do anything and everything. And we're looking for novelty as well, I think, always with Aries, the new, the novel. And then I think it's in September, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that Saturn goes back into Pisces again. And that sense of sort of confusion, that sense of treading water, that sense of your boundaries are being breached in very different ways, and that kind of confusion. So that's something to sort of bear in mind when you come to new projects. And then finally, Saturn, I think, settles in Aries for 2.5 years or so in February next year, I think it is, something like that, or the end of this year. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then I think it's definitely in February next year, 2026, when Saturn completes that conjunction with Neptune. So you've got this kind of still got that confusing energies. That's kind of like you're on the starting line and you're ready to go and you're hot, because Aries is obviously hot. You know, Saturn's a cold planet. Aries is hot, so it's almost like you're sort of on the start line. You're ready to go, and then someone throws a bucket of cold water over you, you know, that kind of feeling. But there's certainly more energy there, definitely, and we can see as well that even though it's out of sign now, the ongoing Saturn-Jupiter square is still ongoing, even though Jupiter's still, as Marcus has said, it's still in Gemini. At the moment, it moves very quickly, very soon. By the time I think of the full moon, we'll look at that chart in a minute, into Cancer, and then you'll get that square a lot tighter again. But this square, the square, we think of, it's easy to think that Jupiter wants to do everything and Saturn stands in the way, or Saturn wants to take responsibility, or Jupiter doesn't have the responsibility. So there's that kind of dynamic. But I find that the way to work with that dynamic is to think about it as ideas and possibilities. And then Saturn comes along and that helps you to manifest those ideas and those possibilities within the structure, within the limitations of the real material world. So these planets do work, even though they feel like opposites, they do work together very well. So that's sort of my take on that. If I can go a little bit off-piste now, and I want to talk about, and hopefully this will make sense, I want to talk about sexual healing. You can see here Mars in Leo, kind of looks like it's on its own a little bit in this chart, and it's making trines here to that Venus in Aries, to Chiron in Aries. So obviously Venus is in Mars's sign and there's a trine there, so that's this easy kind of allowing energies. I was thinking of that song, there's that song, I can't remember who it sang, but Sexual Healing, that I could hear that kind of tune going through my head. And you've got
Chiron. Is it Marvin Gaye?
Marvin Gaye, yeah, right. Marvin Gaye. You've got that healing, and then also not shown in this chart at 26 or 27 degrees of Aries, we've got Eris. Eris is the sister of Mars. She was not desired. It's about desire, you know, isn't it? This whole thing, one of the things it's about, of course. She was not desired. She was rejected. She's the sort of the warrior who behaved badly because she was rejected. Started a war, actually. If you look at the myth of Eris, you'll see it's very interesting.
Andy, I have the perfect story to follow on from this when you've finished. So
perfect. So this is a time, sort of, particularly from the feminine point of view, really, I would say. Well, from both points of view, really, it's a time for potential sexual healing. And then I saw that in the chart. And then it's always nice to see, it's always nice to look, or good or interesting, not always nice, to see what's happening in the news. But it's also interesting to see what's happening in the media. And often you'll see television shows that represent some of these astrological configurations, and on the UK's Channel 4 at the moment they've got a television show, a reality television show, which is consisted of members of the public who are in their 20s and 30s, and they are still virgins and they don't want to be virgins anymore. And this whole program is about the therapy that they go through, and the therapy gets very, very physical therapy. And the aim over the series, they're on an island and they have all these therapists, and the psychological stuff, but also the physical stuff as well. They've actually got a surrogate partners where they can kind of literally practice on. So I thought that's quite interesting for this configuration. It really kind of reflects what's going on in the chart, because remember, there's all Mars is making all these trines at the moment, so this kind of allows things to come through, allows emotions to come through, allows desire to come through. And like Marcus was saying, with all this Gemini as well, there are conversations perhaps to be had as well. Communication is key for good relationships in general, but it's also very important for good sexual relationships as well.
Yeah. Marcus, you say you have some
story.
That's
fantastic. Thank you, Rod, and thank you, Mandy. That's great, and that's really funny that you mentioned that. Because I was literally listening to a podcast this morning about, I don't know if you know this, there's an influencer called Aubrey Marcus. He has a podcast sort of in the sort of spiritual new agey space. He's kind of like, he's an interesting character because he sort of looks a bit like sort of like a bodybuilder, Tony Robbins type. And he's always talking about ayahuasca ceremonies and spiritual stuff and all that. Anyway, he got into a bit of controversy literally this week with a new podcast that he's dropped where he's talking about his relationship with his wife, who's mentioned many times in the podcast, and how they have now introduced a third person to their relationship. And of course, this is controversial because polyamory for some people is problematic. For other people, it's a good thing, whatever. But lots of sort of I watched bits of it, and it's just like, I can't actually watch this. It kind of like really set off my Scorpio rising. I was just like, ugh. It just felt really like they were justifying it felt too justify. I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me at all. And it's generated a lot of controversy. Now, whatever you think about polyamory and those different forms of relationship, it's absolutely on point with what you were talking about here, Mandy. And particularly, I know his chart, he has an Aries rising. So funnily enough, the minute Saturn went into Aries, bang, all this controversy lands on his head as a consequence of his own thing. And of course, he's a podcaster. He's talking about it. He's got all the Gemini going on. He's literally just talking about, so literally every point that you mentioned there, Mandy, that was so I just thought that's fascinating. And it's generating lots of discussion, which I think is a very positive thing, actually, irrespective of, whatever his own personal dynamics are in the relationship or whatever. But very interesting and very on point. And just to say, like the Venus Mars trine that you mentioned, Mandy, is overall a very positive trine, but it's interesting that, like, from the modern astrology, sorry, there's building work going on outside, guys. I can't do anything about it, but it's not me farting. But yeah, just it's interesting from the modern astrology point of view. We've got Saturn and Chiron and Eris all piled into Aries as well, like Chiron and Eris particularly, and even Neptune, talking about the difficulties in relationship and the wounds and illusions and stuff. And from a traditional point of view, of course, you could just look at Saturn in its fall and Venus in her detriment in Aries. That's kind of like they're both struggling to get to grips with the desire nature there, and the nature of the desire is too hot. Venus needs cool, like she needs to be in sort of like a stable comfort or clear, easy, rational communication. Like Venus in Aries is just too fiery, so, but it's still got that nice trine to the ruler Mars. It's okay, we've got these strong desires, this very strong desire nature. We could actually have these desires granted right now with the trine, but oh look, there may be some issues with this, or other people may have issues with this. Let's talk about it. So yeah, really interesting.
Wow, so interesting. Yeah, and apart from this story and the Mandy's very vivid to describe this Mars and the Venus, I also really enjoy every time when Marcus interpret the chart from the traditional view and including triplicity, and always feel like we learn a lot. This morning when I went out for walk, when I thinking about how to interpret this new moon chart, I still trying to somehow I will try to use Marcus, how how these two planets they in traditional terms receive each other, or how they enjoy or like, or how they has like maybe like they hate each other or they against each other, and it's like a dynamic or a drama on the stage
Yes,
that goes.
I didn't even mention that, Rod. On that point, of course, Venus and Saturn in Aries really don't like each other. They don't like themselves and they don't like each other very much. You know, that would be one way of putting it traditionally. I tend to think of it just in the way of like, I wouldn't say that a planet in like Venus in detriment. So, Sonal, an astrologer colleague of ours, mentioned this before, like when we were speaking to her last week. Planet in detriment in Jyotish, in Vedic astrology, detriment isn't a thing. It's not a problem. And also in ancient Hellenic texts, detriment isn't. Fall, planets in fall are considered to be having problems, but detriment isn't. So I find that really interesting because I always think planets in detriment, it's not that they're weak. It's just that it's almost like they're contradictory. Do you know what I mean? So like Venus in Aries, she's like trying to do Venus stuff in Aries' house. So it's sort of almost like in order to get love, you have to have conflict and competition and challenge, and things got to be spicy, you know. And Venus and Saturn in Aries. So all of this to say, I think there's many different ways of getting to the same thing. So all of those beautiful points you were making, Mandi, about Eris and Chiron, they add nuance and detail, I think, that isn't there perhaps, but in the tradition you can get to a similar point from a different angle, I think, by looking at the so it's just like say astrology is so multifaceted, and all of these facets are, I think, useful and workable. So
And here's another interesting thing from this program, is that there's a man there who's very enthusiastic about the whole process, and he decided that it would be a nice idea to complement all. I mean, there's so much empathy for the I won't call them contestants, for the young people that have been brave enough to put themselves forward for this process. There's so much empathy and compassion for them as I'm watching it. The group of sort of therapists, I'll be honest, make me feel a little bit queasy, because it's like, oh, really? Yeah, they're really, okay. But that's a personal thing, I guess.
Can I ask why, Mandi? Were they a little too permissive, or were they? What was these? I mean, obviously, this is going to be a very personal thing, in the same way that I felt uneasy watching Aubrey Marcus's podcast.
Yeah.
Not, but what was it that made you uneasy about them? Was it a lack of boundaries, like too permissive, or?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it's just like a very strange business for anyone to be in. I don't know. I can't even put words to it. I think they're so nice and so lovely. All of them are exquisitely attractive with exquisitely beautiful bodies.
Right.
And then the contestants are also very beautiful, but they're all beautiful in a very ordinary way. So there's this kind of strange sort of
interesting, a weird power imbalance, and it's sort of set up to like aspire to be one of these beautiful elite people who've got their lives together and aren't virgins,
exactly.
It's got some weird, the vibes are very similar to the podcast I was talking about, in that there's a weird, it just left me feeling a bit, I'm not sure about this. It seems so it's very, I think there's something in that about the Venus in Aries, all about, because I have Venus in Aries natally, and it's not a great position for Venus, because it can be quite magnetic and quite dynamic and all that nice stuff, but it's also a little bit it can be a bit superficial. It can be a bit like just competitive about things which ought to be, like Venus is exalted in Pisces. It's all about the romance and beautiful, and like, feelings, how do you feel? Whereas Venus in Aries is like, I want that. Do you know what I mean? I want that because and it's almost got an ego thing. Love takes on an egotistical dimension, which is not super good for it. Egotistical and competitive, and probably coming from a place of lack. And then you put Saturn into that sign, and Saturn in Aries is both giving sort of discipline, but also has weird boundary problems. So it's sort of, and traditionally in old texts, Venus Saturn has a weird mixed reputation, because Venus Saturn in the ancient astrology was, that combination was often related to things which are traditionally judged as being sordid, you know, like a bit potentially damaging to one's self-esteem, let's say, where one might become sexually permissive or whatever. And obviously, like these days, everyone's very sex positive, and the cultural wind has changed significantly, but there's still it has that reputation of potentially causing consequences, damage, Saturn potentially through sex, or so it's got this sordid vibe. But then on the other hand, it also has this reputation for cementing relationships, like Venus Saturn, as we know, has that sort of, and that goes back to ancient times. Like they have this thing of, these people may have difficulty finding a partner, but when they do, it might last a long time, or it's good for contracts. So yeah, but it's just interesting that they're both in Aries and they're both having problems. And then, as you say, Mandy, with those extra planets in the mix, like Chiron and Eris and Neptune, none of them particularly conducive to straightforwardness.
And there was I'll be brief, but there was an incident that really plugged into that, the woundedness of that configuration, with the wound of Eris, the wound of Chiron. And it was one of the chaps that was very enthusiastic about the whole process, and he thought it would be a lovely thing to every day, and he's written it all down in his notebook, to give a compliment to the ladies who are part of that process. And it really backfired on him. It felt like, or it sounded like, some of the women got very upset, the young women got very upset. It was like he was ranking them.
Oh gosh!
Like he said, he named two of the ladies as the most attractive, and this kind of thing. It really backfired. So
isn't that perfect for the current Aries like pile up?
Exactly. And this was some of the, you know, these young women were dealing with rejection in various different ways. And
and all of that's Venus Saturn, isn't it? And the ranking thing that you mentioned there, Mandy, is also a very Saturnine thing.
Exactly. I mean, even the one who was ranked as the most attractive said, "Don't give me any more compliments. I don't like it. I don't want it." You know? Anyway, so it really goes into
that is Eris's apple, if nothing
else.
I mean, that's literally for the fairest, right?
The golden he gave the apple to the fairest, and she was like, "I don't think so." I
mean, I kind of feel sorry for the guy, right? I mean, just like he literally, he must have something at that 20-25 Aries mark in his chart, you know. He literally became the avatar of Eris for that.
And then he was actually rejected by the surrogate partner as well subsequently.
Wow.
So anyway, we're talking about a TV show, so
but
it just was so perfect for the astrology.
Yeah, indeed. Well, now let's move to the full moon, and the things are very, very different, to be honest, because that not only that 3 planets change the sign between the new moon until the next full moon on the 11th of June. So during that time, we have the Venus move to Taurus. Wow, that is like a little bit more comfortable, isn't it? And we have Jupiter finally leave the Gemini, move to Cancer, where exalted, and Mercury also moved to Cancer. So with everything's changing, especially Jupiter and the Mercury changed very quickly, because between Mercury was moved to Cancer on the 8th of June, and then Jupiter was moved to the Cancer at 9th of June. So during the 24 hours, we have between Sunday and Monday. And what I always remember Christine Skinner say, when you have 2 planets changing sign in 24 hours altogether, usually that is a huge wave of a changing coming around that time. And because it's, I think it's a kind of what should I say, it's like emphasize that change things, So, who want to start? Marcus, you want to start with this?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, no, that's
Jupiter.
Really interesting, Rod. And I think this change, if it does signal a change, should for the vast majority of people be quite a positive one, because if that change happens that weekend, for most people, not all, because for some people, Jupiter and Venus might rule difficult houses in their charts, yada, yada. But for most people, it's going to be super positive, because you've got both benefics entering signs where they're really dignified. So Venus moving from Aries into Taurus, which she rules, and Jupiter moving from Gemini into Cancer, where he's exalted. So both benefics are moving from signs of their detriment, where they are a little more conflicted, into signs where they can express their gifts more fully and more positively. And they're in a whole sign sextile, so they're supporting each other's agenda. Venus's agenda here is to bring material comfort and physical pleasure, and Jupiter's agenda in Cancer is to make everybody feel like they belong. And it's kind of like with Mercury there, with Jupiter in sextile to Venus, Mercury is contained between Jupiter and Venus, because you see Mercury's moving away from the conjunction of, actually no, I tell a lie, Mercury is actually squaring Saturn as well. So that's an interesting little tincture of poison into that mix that we'll talk about in a second. So Mercury this month, I think, might be quite positive around this full moon for having some really more constructive emotional conversations, or would it though? Because this is the problem with not having done any preparation, because Mercury is in a water sign, which is mute. So it might be a good full moon for having some emotional realizations about sort of what the barriers and impediments and obstacles in your life are, what needs to be pushed through. Why do I say that? Because you can see Saturn conjunct Neptune is squaring Jupiter and Mercury, but Jupiter's very strong, stronger than Saturn is. There's the sextile with Venus, and Jupiter and the moon at this full moon have a generosity, because Jupiter is in Cancer, ruled by the moon, and the moon is in Sag, ruled by Jupiter. So it's kind of like whatever comes out onto the table, whatever's being made apparent and manifest at this full moon, it'll be some kind of, it'll signal, I think, for most people, some positive shift in potentially, you know, like how they might feel in their bodies, how you might feel in terms of belonging, and in terms of how there might be some positive realizations brought about by that Mercury Jupiter conjunction in Cancer, in sort of inner emotional realizations, thoughts about the obstacles that square from Saturn that need to be overcome, about the things that you need to sort of, the things that are in your way, but they should be quite positive. So that's just some stuff off the top of my brain, and I have a couple of other thoughts that are there. In that Venus in Taurus is really positive, but she's actually pretty close to a conjunction, if not exactly conjunct, the Mars in Leo by Anticyon. So there's a hidden, invisible influence of Mars in Leo there. I think she's just approaching conjunction by Anticyon within I don't know, a minute. So it's kind of like, if there are any shifts around this full moon of like, in terms of Venus stuff, relationships, enjoyable things, there will be an element of freneticness or competition or stress behind the scenes associated with those things. So we've my TLDR, we've got a mostly positive full moon with some positive realizations being made, some positive changes, but on both dimensions they involve some element of challenge as well to realize those things or associate with those things. That's my cliff notes, I think.
Cool. Well, Mandi?
Fabulous. Yeah, I'm just looking at the full moon opposition, and then it makes a mutable cross, grand cross, with the nodes, if we include the nodes in this configuration. So this is, for me, kind of signals it's all mutable. It's something to do with needing to be versatile and adaptable. We've already talked about the end of Jupiter in Gemini. Now it's in Cancer, and that we want to be more comfortable. We want to have time to rest and relax and to sort of be at home, to bring it back home again. So I think this mutable grand cross might have something to do with letting go of some of the things that are overwhelming us, that we can let go of, that we don't have to do it, we don't have to do it now. And I think it's a full moon because it's in Sagittarius, where actually perhaps it might be a nice time to lighten up and have a bit of fun. Because I think we're all going to be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I mean, there's a sense of overwhelm as you're coming up to full moon anyway. We've only just, as we're recording this, we've only just had the new moon. But there's a sense of sort of overwhelm. There's a sense of kind of letting go of a few things. The South Node is here in Virgo. Virgo clings to all the details, all the little things, worries about all the little things. So it's kind of like maybe it's don't sweat the small stuff and have a little bit of fun during this full moon period. That's what I would say. And yeah, and really what Marcus said was really, really brilliant as well. I think very good.
Well, I love that, Mandy. I really love that, because I think what you've just we've drawn attention to is that the lunation itself is in those quite Gemini and Sag are quite busy signs. They're not known for like just sitting on their backsides, are they? They're quite frenetic sometimes, and it's a full moon, and they're both in trine or sextile to Mars. So that's a trine and sextile. It's not square, but as you say, the vibes of the full moon itself are quite busy. But the tone shift of Venus and Jupiter, as you say, it's like it's sort of you want to relax. So I think exactly what you said. I love that, Mandy, about the South Node being in Virgo, and the moon that when the full moon's at the bendings like that, at the squaring the nodes, it's exactly what you said, where it's a change in the weather. It's like this is a pivot point. But as you also said, Mandy, because they're mutable, the image I got in my head is of a weathercock. You know, the wind blows that way and then it blows that way, and it's sort of like, you know, kind of, we just want to sit down and enjoy a nice pina colada in a deck chair or whatever. But actually there's like this little weathercock blowing. It's like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do, you know. So it's kind of, it's both and, I think, isn't it? It's like it's exactly what you and letting go of not sweating the small stuff. I think you've just put your finger right on the thing that needs to happen here. And
we're going out of Gemini. You know, within 10 days or so of this full moon, we're going out of Gemini season. I know Uranus is moving towards Gemini, but not yet. But we're going that Gemini, that kind of, when your mind won't shut up, and there might be in the run up to this full moon, from the new moon to the full moon, there might be for some people a little bit of anxiety as well. And again, there's that kind of, it does feel like a bit of a release of anxiety, because the South Node ruler, as you've already said, in Mercury, is now in Cancer, just wanting to be at home. And here's a really interesting, a home where you or where you belong. And it's interesting, Rod, the minute you put this chart up, this full moon chart with this very different energy, although some of the aspects are still valid, we talked about for the new moon, but the minute you put this chart up on screen, and then Marcus started talking, this one jumped on my lap.
Oh.
So yeah,
that's great.
Needed comfort. Needed a comfort.
For a little bit of comfort, yeah. So he's kind of helping me read the chart a little bit. Bless him.
That's a great metalog, Mandy. I like that.
I love stuff like that.
I would add a little bit interesting fixed stars, because that 20 degree of Gemini is not far from the Bellatrix. And we know from the traditional view of the fixed star, Bellatrix has kind of a harsh voice. So it's always leading to kind of argument or discussion, or talk loudly, speak out loudly, or it's not really bad thing. Some astrologer like Vivian Robson believe that Bellatrix can bring like a civil owner or the owner in the military, but usually come together with a little bit, you know, hostile environment when you are doing something good, but people are envy, or people really want to attack you, or want to have a go with you. So this sun there is quite interesting, and to get put together with that ongoing Jupiter-Saturn square and upcoming the Mars-Uranus square. So there is a anticipation there. There is an excitement, like you say. We just want to sit down, have a pina colada or something, but the things is like where I'm going, why, what should I do for next things? So So that is quite interesting, you
Yeah,
know,
it's
and
it's this weird combination of
mm,
potential great comfort and
yes,
stress at the full moon, and or busyness or hecticness, and maybe the Saturn sort of squaring that Jupiter Mercury is like, you've got a few things you got to wrap up before you can kind of sit down and enjoy that martini or whatever it is, you know, cup of tea. So I wanted to do the usual like lunar mansion thing, because you know the moon,
yeah,
the moon. So
yeah.
Chris, this 21st lunar mansion, the image is of a man having, it's called the city, and the image is of a man having two faces, one facing forward and one facing behind. In our image, the two-faced man sits on a rich carpet and cushions with one hand upraised. Behind him are the walls of a great city, a crescent moon and stars, blah, blah, blah. And it says the meaning of this mansion is like Janus. Like you've got
Yeah.
things, and it's usually about endings. It says it's a sign of enmity and anger, argument and conflict. It may signal that someone is being two-faced, but it's the time to, if it's about an activity, it's the time to accept that the path we traveled has reached its end. We are playing an end game. It's time to cut our losses. And it was used traditionally in elections to make strong buildings, increase harvests, make a profit, and keep money, to go safely through villages, but to separate wives from their husbands. And it was also used in elections for destruction. So it's got this two, you know, like this is the kind of the weathercock, the stress thing. It's kind of like so exactly what you were saying, Mandi, about that South Node in Virgo. Something got to go. It's sort of like you got to sort of like and I think what you said, not sweating the small stuff. So if at this full moon there's like, I could just be really enjoying myself, but I've got all this stressful shiz to do, or this craziness going on, or I feel really stressed. Try to let go or remove something that is just not necessary anymore. It's not serving you anymore, and you're like worried about it and obsessing about it. And it's just some small stuff. It's some detail so just drop the little things at this time and focus on the big things. And maybe something needs to, as the lunar mansion, sort of cut your losses on something in order to, so it might just be at this time, what comes out on the table is like, all right, juggling too many balls or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, the desire to feel, the desire, I think, to feel safe as well. The desire to want to feel safe and to feel protected as well, I think, comes in a little bit.
Definitely. And I do think there is a potential here to sort of reconfigure your thinking in a way that is much more conducive to your emotional well-being.
Yeah.
Wow, sounds very interesting formal coming up. But by the time we release this episode, the podcast will be on a Friday night. There's one thing I want to invite all our audience to join. If you haven't booked the Astrological Association conference, I know it's not really my business, but you know, this year Marcus is going to have a workshop and a talk during the conference.
As are you, Rod. So we're both.
Yeah, and we will definitely see Mandi there too. So I would like to invite everyone and give you information, because I think by the 31st of May would be the last day you're going to enjoy the big discount. I think someone can some can come to like £125 discount. So don't miss this chance. This will be last one. Okay. So if you haven't booked the Astrological Association conference from this 27th of August to 31st of August, please quick go to the association website to book it. Okay.
If you're in the UK or can travel to the UK, it's a fantastic venue it's a fantastic thing to actually be there in person as a residential delegate, because it doesn't matter if you're just a beginner or a student, or whether you're a professional astrologer. There's something for everyone, and it's so fantastic to just spend 3 days or more. If you do, there's more activities. You can spend 4 days there if you want to, 3 or 4 days there, just talking astrology over a cup of coffee or a meal or a drink, and going to talks and talking about the talks afterwards. And if you can't come, then there is an online option anyway, and everyone who books gets access to all the recordings, because on the
Yes.
day, I think for each talk you're choosing between, I think, 4 or 5 different talks, so you can't see
Yeah.
everything. But now, even if you're residential online, you'll get access for, I think, for a month or so afterwards, so you can, all the things that people say, oh, I watched this talk, it was the best one, oh, I didn't see that one, you can still catch up.
Definitely. Thanks for technology. That yeah. Well, also I want to remind everyone, don't forget to go to check out Mandi's book On Purpose Life, your guide finding and living your life purpose. Okay. So well, thanks everyone to join us this week. And then next week would be the mountain astrology discussion. Me and our usual team will coming up to talk about, coming up summer solstice, Cancer English would be very interesting too. And so we will see each other next month then. So thank you, Mandi, and thank you, Marcus, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Bye bye.
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 Bye.